everybody, welcome to G4G here on YouTube. Today's background soundtrack is brought to you by the Final Fantasy 13-2 OST. Now, Final Fantasy 13-2 is a somewhat maligned game in the Final Fantasy series, but I have always happened to love it, and I really like 13-2's music tons. So, what are we going to talk about today? Well, today we are going to talk about Angrir teams and double and triple blaster blowups. If you are not familiar with what I'm talking about, Angrir, I think, requires no introduction whatsoever. However, the blaster blowup teams maybe you have and maybe you haven't run into yet. So here is the deal. What is blaster blowup? Well, there are two variants of it, double and triple. And before we get into that, I would like to give a shout out to all the people who are members of the WRT Alliance in Marvel Avengers Alliance-1. You guys are apparently scrubby blaster blowup teams, and I've run into multiple WRT members who run that, especially today. And by the way, I beat you all. So you can kiss my ass, and you can maybe try to make teams that actually earn their victories properly, you scrubs. So, that being said, let's move on. Now, I actually have some disoriented and Sonic gear. That's because I was leveling Shocker earlier, so that's what that's about. Anyway, double and triple blaster blowups. What is the deal with that? What is that referencing? Well, it is running people who run blasters on defense and run them in a state that it gives them the new blaster ISO that is in the store called Fatal Finish. What happens is that when people die with that ISO on, they basically explode. They go poof and a lot of damage is done. Now, was it ever intended by Playdom for people to equip all three of them and be able to erase teams from existence? Make it so that killing somebody actually becomes a very negative thing. I, in Playdom's infinite wisdom, do not think that they ever considered this to happen. However, that is just a poor example of game testing. But, you know, we know that that happens sometimes. So, what can you do to save yourself from this? Well, for one, if you are running double blaster blowup, probably what is happening is that two of the people are running blaster blowup, and the third is providing some kind of a vehicle for despair. An example of that would be Blaster Agent, Blaster Angrir, and Kolth. And by that I mean either Null or Kurth. You know one of those guys is guaranteed to put out despair, because it is now unstoppable by the Deb, because the Deb no longer interrupts subtle actions. And of course there are variants of it with, like, say, Pesty, for example. Anybody who has a debuff that is subtle is now, of course, capable of using the new ISOs like Straining and Endemic and the Despair. So in the case of Angrir, Blaster Agent, and Null, and this is actually one of the work teams that I faced earlier today, and you know what, as a matter of fact, I will even continue with the public shaming of it, and point out the team because he's not too far down in my battle reports over here. So there it is, Danwart L. This was a double blaster blowup. This was Null, Angrir, and the Agent. And somewhere earlier in the day, there it is, Diverwort. This one I actually lost to. And that was because not of the actual team, but because of the bugs that exist in the game where buffs are not properly loaded when the round begins. So my Psylocke, who was supposed to be stealthy, was not stealthy, and that executed basically a chain of events where things went super bad. But How can you deal with it? Well, double blaster blow up is obviously the easier one to deal with. There's usually two people who blow up, and then there's the despair creator. Here's what I did. I got rid of Angrir super early. He was gone before he could even get so much as a full turn. What happened was my agent used the Scroll of Rudimaroth, which exhausted him. He did the you can't heal succubus summon, and then his turn ended because I got lucky that he went ahead and did exhausted on the Scroll of Rudimaroth, which was absolutely phenomenal. So after that, he was simply deleted. The rest of my team collapsed in on him, and Angrir was dead before his next action. So now, of course, Null gets his turn. He puts out Despair on my team, and he only manages to get one stack of meteors on me, and that's really about it. So what I do is I work him down while the Despair is on me, and I get rid of him, basically leaving the agent untouched. I just pretend that the agent doesn't exist. So once I get rid of Null, I don't have to worry about the Despair anymore. After that, I slowly work the agent down until he's near death. I make sure my people are relatively healthy from the cube, the weather control device, and the alluring light. And then when I blew up the agent, he was not able to kill my team. The other thing that you can do is run people like Archangel and Captain Britain, people who recharge their health when people die. My team features Archangel, so there have been times where the team has been saved quite nicely by the fact that Archangel heals when people die. So now there is, of course, Triple Blaster Blow Up, and there are two variants of that. One is the version that runs a Despair on some of the blasters, and you can do that with like Deathlock. You could possibly do that with Elsa, but the Deb likes to stop Elsa in her tracks. Basically, they run a blaster that somehow puts out Despair, or they go ahead and run the Ionic Devourer on the agent. So how do you deal with that? Well, it is pretty similar to what you would have to do for the other teams. Basically, you kill two, and you kill out the two, or at least the one who puts out the Despair. Once that happens, just chill out, heal up, and then kill the very last person when you know your hit points can sustain it. So what would I like to see happen from Playdom with this? What would I like for them to do? Well, I would like for them not to have the blow up be catastrophic. So if you had a mirror reality up, the blow up heals you. Or if you're phased, it doesn't hurt you. Obviously the counter of that is to run phase frequencies, but not everybody is capable of doing that. Or make it so that fatal blow simply kills the person and they don't blow up, so that if you fatal blow them, they're not allowed to pop off. Now, we do have a mob in the game that already does something similar. Those floating demons that you often see in the magic user dailies, they do that too. The little blaster eyes, when they get down to 0 hit points, they hang out for a second, and then they blow up. Well, if they have dots on them, or if they're exhausted, basically they die, and they just die. And of course, if you fatal blow them, they don't do that little explosion. So that's something that I really would like to see, a way of killing people without the fatal finish blowing up, because then this way, Playdom doesn't have egg on their face. They can't say, oh god, we're sorry, this is really bad, we get it. Yeah, our bad, we'll fix that. They don't have to worry about that so much as they just have to introduce a counter for it. And they can leave the damage in place. They can leave the idea of double and triple blaster blow up, but they make it so that it isn't always executable. Or make it so that the final person, the match ends right on the death. So in other words, instead of 1 second the person dies, split second later the blaster blow up happens. They make it so the last person dies, and then that's it. The round is over, the match is over, the blow up doesn't go out. One of those things honestly needs to happen, because right now triple blaster blow up is incredibly cheesy and in all reality just shouldn't exist. It is something that I think Playdom said this will be interesting and it fits with the theme of blasters, and they never ever should have done. It's just clearly something that should not exist in the wild, and I don't think Playdom thought it out properly. So now, what about Angrir? Lots of people are very, very frustrated by his double summons. And a lot of people believe that pretty much what he does are the two bad summons. He purges you, and then he goes ahead and he possesses you. Now, obviously, if you have the Mystic Shroud up, all of his first round possessions are bad. Are okay, except for the Purge one. However, do note that when the Purged one goes out, you are free to clean yourself afterwards, because it tries to affect you. Your Mystic Shroud cancels it. The game thinks, okay, you had this debuff go out, you cancel it, it'll activate. The good thing is, Purged has now gone off, so you are completely free to run a cleanse and get your heal up. So, if you have the weather control device and you get purged in the first round while a Mystic is up, you are absolutely free to use your Warm Zephyr, and you will now no longer take damage because it's already happened. And you especially want to do that when you have to deal with the fact that you may have Despair on there, like Null and Kurth. So the moment the Angrir stuff resolves and you take that hit, just heal up as soon as you can. Obviously, if you have Despair, you're out of luck. Now, some of what you could do is at least shield yourself. If you have shields, you can prevent the damage from happening. And that's sort of like World of Warcraft. Some healers heal, some healers shield. Heroes of the Storm is the same way. So by all means, if you're worried about Despair and you're worried about the Purge and everything, start running shields, like the free action version of the custom magnetic field generator. If people pop that, you get an extra turn and you can make them pay. And also, the shield protects you from the damage, so you can't heal the damage, but maybe you can protect yourself until the Despair runs off. Because the most common ways that people are putting out Despair are not ones that are particularly sustainable. They happen from Nulls, You're Not Worthy, or Kurth level 6. Kurth never repeats her level 6 in a match. She just never really goes back to it unless her runes have exploded and consumed it, and then she'll try to reapply it. It's not like Magneto, who keeps trying to polarize you all the time, if he can. So there is always that. If it is Kurth who did it, well then don't worry, you can wait the Despair out. It's never going to get reapplied. If it's Null, don't forget, Null is very susceptible to exhaustion. Exhaustion really shuts him down. If he does happen to do the You're Not Worthy, then that's it. That's the end of his turn. He is exhausted, and he doesn't have any kind of protection for that. So by all means, have at it. Exhaust him, and it will limit him. So maybe he puts Despair on you, but he's not going to be able to meteor stack that turn. Now, be forewarned, though. If he does get exhausted in the first round and does You're Not Worthy, he more often than not tries to world break in the second turn, but that might give you enough time to kill him before you have to worry about the meteor stacks. If Null is the Despair giver, just simply, like I said before, get rid of him as soon as possible, and you don't have to worry about him refreshing the Despair on you. Now, other people who run multiple blaster blow-ups and run a despair in there, if it's the Ionic Devourer, just try to kill the agent as soon as possible. If it's one of the other blasters, remember, always try to make it so that the despair giver is second. So, kill a blaster, you get the damage, get rid of the despair giver, and then just play very defensively and try to wait it out while the despair goes away, and when you have the ability to, heal up. The other thing you can do, and this is not necessarily true of Angrir or Kurth, but Null is definitely susceptible to disorient. If you keep him disoriented, he more than likely will go ahead and try to hammer his own team. So use that against him. Don't forget about the lessons that we learned when it came to Null in previous seasons. Keep him exhausted and also try to keep him disoriented, and you may not have to worry about it. So guys, I hope this helps you out. I hope it helps you deal with Blaster Blowup and Angrir. By the way, Angrir is definitely susceptible to exhaustion himself. Learn from my lesson that the Scroll of Runemeroth did for me today. If he's exhausted, he only does one summon, and then that is it. So, if you have the ability to do it, by all means do it. And it may be that you adjust your hero slightly and run a hero that brings exhaustion. You know, Deathlock is capable of doing despair, and he's also capable of doing exhaustion with his ISOs. So by all means, don't forget about that. Keep that in mind. So guys, hope it helps. Have a good one.